welcome to the Bigger True Show. I'm Scott McMahon, and this is an exciting show, and I'm excited that you're all here. And for our guests, and I'll bring them on in just a moment, I just wanted to share just really briefly that I don't know if you've been feeling this way, but I have really been feeling overwhelmed and just tired of all of the lies. There are so many lies, and the ways that these lies are just in a very coordinated and scripted fashion, the way that they're disseminated and spread and forced upon us and shoved down our throats, it's just annoying. Whether it is, and it's so hard to discern what's true and what's false. And the best psyop, of course, is partly true, and which makes it even more annoying, right? And I just really briefly, and this isn't what we're going to be talking about, but I know that what I find comfort in and guidance in and the ability to keep pushing on is in Jesus Christ. He is the way and the truth and the life, and no one, he said himself, that no one comes to the Father except through him. And if that's something that you would like to know more about, you're welcome to DM me, ask me, or if there's somebody else in your life that reads the Bible, but the Jesus of the Bible is the only true Bible. There's a lot of imaginary psyop but Jesus is out there. There's a lot of psyops in this world. There's a lot of lies, and that's something that we've been promised. So really there's nothing new under the sun. And over the last 2,000 years, really since the fall, we have been lying to each other. And so I guess that's what we're continuing to do. But the good news is that, we are in the middle of a movement to expose that. And I am not, and, I know that Jeff and Shannon are, and probably most, if not, many, if not most of you, are Q followers. I'm not. It's just not something that I ever got into. And, but the amazing thing, the interesting thing to me is that we've all come to very similar conclusions, particularly about the Flynn network. And so that is what we're going to be talking about today, is the Flynn network and how it started, how it came to be. And it's brought us, the Flynn network has actually brought us together. Yeah. we wouldn't know each other if it weren't for the Flynn network. So there's good in it too. And I think it's brought all of us together, and all of you that are watching here too. So,
and Scott, amen what you said earlier too. I'm tired, but I'm more tired from winning. I mean, there's been so much winning. Yes, the psychological operations do drag one down. However, with what Trump is actually doing, I'm just so, it's just amazing. I'm so excited.
And I think it's so important. What I love about your guys' show, and my mom watches your guys' show every day.
Hi, Mom. That's awesome.
But and she always gives me the highlights, and I often watch the highlights. So I always try to tune in, and I often listen because I can hear her in the next room as I'm working. So
we'll have to shout Mama McMahon out.
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, her name's Kathy. So yeah, but we. I really appreciate that you guys focus so much on the good things that Trump is doing, because that's so important, and that's deliberately lost in all of the noise that's out there. So kudos to you guys for doing that. And so I want to get right into it, because we've got so much to cover, and I appreciate you guys coming on, because you're coming on as whistleblowers. You're sharing and this probably isn't something that you guys get to do every day on your show, because you're covering what's happening, and there's so much going on. And so and this is also going to help me with the project that I'm working on, that hopefully I'll be able to talk about soon. But the how did you guys get started? I want to really explore and dig into the origins of the Flynn network, how the Flynn network started, and how it grew, because I think it did so systematically and very deliberately. And so how did you guys get into all this? How did you guys, I know Q started in 2017.
Yep.
And if you each want to tell your story and how you got into this, that'd be great.
I'll let you start, Jeff, real quick. I'll be right back.
Okay, I was gonna let you start, but since you got to be right back, I'll start. Okay, so I found Q, and I was on the Anon boards. I was on 4chan, I saw the FBI anon stuff and all the other stuff, and I find things like that very interesting, right? Because I've done a lot of research in my days. I've listened to a lot of different conspiracy theorists are now becoming true, in fact, and I'm a pretty sharp guy. I was I ran a $100 million a year business in Manhattan, global business as well. And then I came down here and ran 3/4 of the country for a high-tech technology chain. And I thought, I was like, wow, this is interesting. Q started dropping. I found it a little bit, maybe November, December of 2017. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is pretty interesting. And I would like look at the Chan boards, wait for Q to post. I would be like, oh my gosh, they wanted somebody to go ahead and be on Twitter. And I went on Twitter to start, bringing the Twitter, the drops over to Twitter at that time. And I did threads. I have almost every Q post on my Twitter, which came back after 803 days suspension. But what happened is I'm like, wow, this is interesting. The first thread I ever did was my Parkland thread, which shows with their own admission, their own voices, that it was a drill that day. There was more than one shooter. I've got many different people saying that there's more than one shooter. I live a county above, that county, right? So where Parkland was, and it hits close to home. And I'm like, wow. So, the sheriff said that one person was dead on the street where nobody was dead on the street. Come out. I mean, it was all just messed up. He's a Hillary Clinton fan. So I got called into something called Discord. Somebody's like, hey, join Discord and, I'll make you a room. So they made me a room. I started then meeting a couple of people that ended up some good, some not so good, mostly not so good. Everybody ended up being Flynn people. Now that knowing what I know now, we're talking thousands. And so they called us in the Discord to try to control, but nobody could ever control me because I was never really a part of one server because I always went back to my own server, did my own research, right? I never really, echoed out a lot of stuff. I mean, I would put, Brilliant Anon came up with this theory, but I would clearly mark it as a theory, right? A fact is a fact, whether we like it or not. So we went into Discord, and then I met Shady while I was hopping around the different servers, and I met him, 2018-ish, later on, like June, maybe May. And I was doing the pay sewer research as well. And we then I brought him in to say, hey, can we poke holes in this research? Because everybody's saying it could be this, it could be that, it could be this. So we did that, and we decided like, wow, we really get along really well. And so Shady and I became friends. And then we ultimately he opened it, and he'll tell you about his Q Lounge Live. But he did a show called the Q Lounge Live, and I was like one of his biggest fans. I loved when he said, good evening, Patriots, right? And he covered Q, similarly to how I kind of covered Q, like, in my threads and whatnot. And I really appreciated that. And then he wanted me to come on and do the pay sewer research thread that I did. And lo and behold, somebody that was a detractor, knowing what we know now, said, hey, Q, does P equal pay sewer? When are we going to see the pain? Where we go, when we go all? And basically, Q reposted that. And we just did 2 shows on the Q Lounge Live. And I was like saying, maybe we shouldn't do this. Maybe this is the disinformation, maybe it's not good. And then that was posted. So it was a very amazing, dig. It was a group dig. There was more than one person than myself and Shady and Poussant and several others that actually helped with the dig. And it even says group dig, but they're like, you stole information. And, all the Anons started going crazy. But while we're in Discord, all of the server leaders, right, all the different people that owned the servers would have a meeting with some guy that ended up being a hacker out of Australia. And they would go there and say, what is your server, working on? What is your server working on? So they wanted to find out what the people were digging on in regards to Q. Lo and behold, maybe that was a nefarious operation, but we all thought it was a good thing. But when a server got going and a really gelled server and people were digging and coming up with stuff, and, I was queued a lot, and, we were people in our server were getting queued because we're doing great research, some drama would happen. And then that server would split and people would go to other sides and there's a division. In fact, Discord used to be called Hammer and Sickle, right? Or Hammer and Chisel. So what do? To split a rock, right? You take a hammer and a chisel and you split it. And that's essentially what Discord's named after. Also, in addition, Flynn had these digital soldiers before 2016, and that comes later. But I guess the essence of how I got into it was I was very intrigued with Q, and I wanted to maybe prove it wrong. Right? I wanted to be like, come on, this is complete BS. There's no way this is real. And then all of a sudden, my research and what I knew started lining up with the drops that the posts that Q was posting, the Q team.
So from the very beginning, how did you know that those people that recruited you into Discord were Flynn people?
We didn't know that at the time.
Okay.
But all of the Anons were saying that Flynn, the 8chan boards, the 4chan boards, the 8chan boards, all the different boards that Q was on, 8kun, they started like, Flynn's a hero, Flynn's a hero. And if you look at Q's posts, it almost looked like he was a hero, right? You could interpret it two ways, a lot of these posts, except for one final one that, Flynn was the striker, right? Flynn's first strike was to cripple and then to cover up Barack Hussein Obama's, chain of command and the crimes, and then insert Rogue McMaster. That was a Q post. And that was like, oh my God, that may not be very good. And then it had a picture that they use all the time. You might see it. It says loading, ... And so it says loading on one side and then ... Think of a gun.
Right.
That's Q was trolling General Flynn because he shot himself in the head. No, just because of, he lied to President Donald J. Trump. If he was such a high, intel agent, national security advisor, wouldn't he know that Comey was setting him up for Russia?
Right.
Right. I mean, so I started thinking like with common sense.
Right. Well, and I mean, the even bigger thing to me and to a lot of people, I think, is Turkey. There is zero way, and Woolsey was involved in that too. As former CIA director, former DI director, and there are all kinds of attorneys in the room too. There is zero chance that he did not know that he needed to register under FARA. So, he's working as an unregistered foreign agent while he's on Trump's campaign, and he knew also that he was under FBI investigation, and he didn't tell Trump.
And remember when I said how convenient Biden's DOJ dropped, or Biden, the judge, right? It was a Biden, under Biden regime, dropped the FARA case of Flynn's associate after a jury said he was guilty. Dropped the case.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't happen, does it?
Right.
And then he called me a POS, and he praised for my audience, and with his little 7 Ray prayer, probably, but whatever.
Right.
I tell you,
he's called me that too. So
we used to be friends with him, so that's why I consider us whistleblowers. Everybody that is in the network, we've hung out with. Pretty crazy.
Well, and you've had so many of them on your show too.
We were like the on-ramp to, for the Flynn networks. That's right. Shady, I just kind of brought us up to when I met you in Discord, and then you had me on the Q Lounge Live.
So Shannon, how did you get? So you had your own show, and that's kind of what Jeff said. That's how you guys met, was through your show, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so how did you get into Q, and how did you get into Discord?
Well, so it's very interesting how the whole thing occurred, like organically, starting with the first post from Q was the post about Hillary, and Hillary is going to be arrested tomorrow. And literally with my interactions from previous to Q were like non-existent. I would be what you would consider a ghost in the machine. Like, I do not exist. I still kind of don't exist. I literally got my first bank account not that long ago, like literally not existing type person, simply because of my previous research and my previous reality, which is I started digging into this stuff way back when I was 20 years old, fresh out of high school, just a couple years out of high school. I maybe probably 6 months after I voted for Bill Clinton, 1992, with my mom, which I got her to register to vote too, by the way, to go out so we could both vote for Bill Clinton.
So you helped GOTV for
Clinton.
That.
And so but to understand a little bit about, like, I'm the last person in the world you're going to want, you would have thought that would have ever picked up a microphone or decided to even start talking about some of this stuff in public, just because I understood how what the gravity of it was, and other people like Bill Cooper and a number of other people that would talk about this stuff and things that happened to them, Irwin Schiff, and people that would talk about the income tax. So all of this, I was kind of like what you would consider a well-researched conspiracy person. And my specialty, if you will, is understanding the Constitution. I went back at 20 years old and I dug into it like I've never seen anybody dig into it. So I went back, I read all the Federalist Papers. I read everything Jefferson said. I read all the stuff and I was realizing that it did not at all compute with the world that I was in. So whenever Q started to post in October, I saw the first post that day and I was like, oh, here we go. This is the next thing. I understood. I don't know if you dug into what FBI Anon was or another. There was a Senate Anon also that came out a year or so before, like back in 2015. These were all like little feeler ops, if you will, I feel like. And to some degree, what Q did was take advantage of that information and twist it around on him. I'm not sure how all that ended up happening. But anyway, Q started to make that post, and then Q made a few other posts, and I was like, oh, well, this is very interesting. And it's, I moved to Oregon. My house burned down in 2015 in North Carolina. I grew up in North Carolina. I lived there my whole life, and I built houses, construction, worked on my own. We had multiple different, facets of, working for the man, then working by the hour, and then owning your own stuff, and then doing things for other people. And that's kind of like where I was whenever my house burned down and I shattered my left leg, couldn't walk anymore, and we couldn't continue the businesses. So the funny thing is I landed in Oregon in 2015 on October 28th. It was 2 years later to the day of the first Q post, which was really weird and odd for me to begin with. But then I would say about 100 posts in, 110, 115 posts in, as Q was starting to do this, and it was starting to generate this interest on 4chan, which is where it started on 4chan. All of a sudden, I could see the stuff by understanding 4chan the way that I did, because I, as a conspiracy guy, that is a location where you would go to, interface with people and say some of the craziest stuff and see some of the craziest stuff that you could possibly research. You're going to find it there. And what started happening is you could see these board ops starting to work against Q. They started to hide the posts. So Q made a post, and then the board ops started to hide them. And we were like, oh, nobody had ever really seen stuff like that before. So it was very odd. And then Q started to acknowledge it, and then Q started to call it out in real time. So there was this back and forth going on. And then Q made the points about the 128, the drop 128 connected to the map being the first one to 128 drops that basically gave us an architecture. So from there, mid-December or so, that's whenever I went to Discord, because I went to Discord because other people were talking about Discord and said, oh, well, this is a place where we're going to research. So I went there, and with the way that the servers work there, you have to actually be invited. So you can't just like go to Discord and get into a server, right? And so you had to like make relationships. And all of a sudden, there was this whole layer that you were seeing. There were all of these servers that were already there. Now, I assumed that this is stuff that had popped up around Q, that had popped up. I'd never been into Discord. I didn't know anything about it. Turns out that it was a very well-oiled machine that I now connected to the operation that the intelligence officers use to control the countries that they initiate a coup in. So you got to have operational control. You got to have people on the ground that can move this information around to undermine attorneys generals in foreign countries, to say, this story's fake or this story's real, or to promote this. And you've seen a number of these different things in the Michigan politics, Arizona politics, Colorado politics, around all these issues that you've been covering, just like that, kind of on a parallel track to us. And so it was very intriguing to me. And it really got to the point where I met Poussant, I met Rocket Girl, the people that are still currently on my team today, on our team today. And we moved through all of this stuff. And then we met Jeff in mid-May or so in 2018. And we met him a little bit. And then I started the Q Lounge, which will be 7 years in June, on June 18th June 22nd of 2018. And man, from there, it just like, it's crazy. Like, like the stuff that we've gone through personally, like, because as we started to the two of us started to sync up, he brought up the PACEOR research, and I'm like, why does that sound familiar? Because he had not published anything about that, and we all knew that Q was saying P. What is P? And all these people were making these dumb guesses like Pendragon and Pendar and the Pope and Pelosi and Pence and all this different nonsense that everybody could tell wasn't. He's like, what do you think about this PACEOR? And I'm like, why does that name sound familiar? And then I realized, oh my God, that's the name from Fritz Springmeier's Bloodlines of the Illuminati, Alex Christopher's Pandora's Elite Box, and also David Icke's The Biggest Secret. I'm like, those were the people that they were talking about, that everybody else was the agents. And then it kind of just like, oh my God. And we started digging into it. That's whenever the network and Discord started activating against us in the background that we didn't realize was happening, that would culminate to the full frontal assault by Flynn Network that's generated very soon after we started our YouTube channel the first of the year. And they had us demonetized from YouTube very, very quickly.
And that was the first of the beginning of 2018 or 19?
2019 was when we started the
19.
Matrix Groove Hour is what we called it, but we could never do the show in an hour. Q would post during our show so much during that first year. It was absolute Red Pill 78. All these people were so incensed by the way that Q would interface with us and the stuff that we were bringing up. And we were constantly seeing that as like, an acknowledgement of, hey, and it's consistently been that way. And I think maybe even you've seen a little bit of the way that things have happened around us, and we just sort of like move through the matrix without really a lot of, we make a lot of waves and they don't really ever get an arrow to stick.
Right. Well, and I think, it's interesting that it's because of the research that you guys were doing and because you weren't controlled by anyone. And that's what
and honestly, I don't think that they anticipated like what the two of us are like literally like what we're good friends, like we're great friends in real life. Like if you were to see the conversations that we have with each other, like I can tell you like our conversations off the air are more fun than the ones on the air. That's just who we are.
Sure.
We tried to bring that, and then these guys all tried to bog us down in this doom and gloom crap.
All right. I wanted to stop you real quick, Shady, when you talked about Discord. Okay, so Shady met Rocket and Poussin in Patriot Soapbox. I think that's very important to mention as part of the Flynn networks as well, Shady Grove. And
it was Calm Before the Storm.
Yep, Calm Before the Storm. So you were in the Patriot, what is it? Patriot Soapbox. And that brings in Jerome Corsi. And
yes.
He was in that server. I wasn't. I think that's important because these were all Flintel agents.
Yes. And they were very active around us, and they would do things like, Poussin would even tell, like the things that they would do to irritate people. Like they would just do things to irritate. Corsi would come in there, Jerome Corsi, and he would be like, he would be like, drinking and like making racial slurs and like cursing at people and like all this stuff. And I'm like, why are we like letting this guy participate with information around Q? Like it doesn't make any sense to me. And then Q ended up outing their whole thing just a month or so later.
Yeah.
And Jerome Corsi, he was on Alex Jones' show, and he was making all kinds of comments about how he knew who Q was. And
he golfed with Q, and I talked to Q, and
right.
all this crap. They didn't. And then they brought in their Zach, and so the Flynn network was separated from InfoWars at that time. They've now all conglomerated together as they had to, as we pushed them into the light further and further. But it's interesting when you look at Jerome Corsi. I blocked him on Twitter, and then he was like all stumbling, couldn't figure out anything because I think he used my threads for decodes as well, along with others as well. The guy was bad. Then Q actually outed him as Mossad.
Oh, wow.
And so then we've got pictures of him hanging out with Mossad agents, Jack Posobiec, Alex Jones, Mossad. Jerome Corsi was in the Mueller investigation testifying. So was General Flynn. 16 times he sat with Mueller. And then us Anons are supposed to say that's a good thing because we'd like the Mueller report, right? No, they were too busy focusing on Trump. They ignored Flynn's misdoings. Flynn actually did a lot of bad things, as you know, Scott.
Yeah, he did.
Yep. And he continues to. So, so what, along those lines, and this is kind of an aside, but it's something that I was reading about this morning, just alleged connections especially at that time between Flynn and Rod Rosenstein. And because Rod Rosenstein was a key figure in the Mueller investigation, a lot of people, it's widely believed that he actually was running the Mueller investigation.
So the Q people know Rod Rosenstein as RR in kill box, okay, and multiple kill boxes, because people are like, oh, Q is just trust the plan. Oh, Q is just this. No, Q outed Rod Rosenstein. Q outed Adam Schiff. Q outed, we've got the whole spy operation. Who did it? How it happened? And now it's coming true. And I got that post on CNN, by the way. So what they need to make sure that this operation called Q, whoever it is, has to be buried, because it's that damning to them.
And it really helped us navigate, Scott. It really helped us navigate in real time, because like this information wasn't being published by the press. This in-depth information about Klein Smith and these other people that were surreptitiously, right. They were surreptitiously leaking and going against it, throwing all this stuff out in the Washington Post and the New York Times, and the media was eating it like candy and just amplifying it, making it so loud in the room. And Adam Schiff comes out with this garbage memo that said all of these different things. Whenever he did that, Q was like right there immediately, like, da, 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 da. These are the things that aren't correct. This is what he's trying to say. This is and reorienting people. But then the network, now looking back on it, it's so crazy. They would always focus on these nonsensical aspects of the Q drops, as opposed to like what we could see now is a lot more meat and potato ideas that were being skipped over because we were thinking Flynn is a good guy. And again, Jeff and I have said this a million times, like, we'll never make this mistake again by, giving a military general the benefit of the doubt like this. Then it doesn't really matter who they are. You got to keep them at arm's length. And we got to realize that there's a layer to this being a general thing that finds its way into the esoteric and then ends up into Satanism. Now, take that for whatever you will. That's what ends up happening a lot of the times.
It's also interesting too, is I was dragged into Flynn's court case against CNN, but keeping that in mind, I can't tell you what I said, because Flynn's attorney made it private. Okay, not Berger, who is the Steele dossier attorney. No, Flynn's attorney made it private, so I can't talk about it. But knowing that I did that, so I was asked one time that what is a Q proof? Okay, they asked me what is a Q proof. I go, well, for example, you have the Durham report, and Durham had what was his name, Shady Groove, in court. Durham had Shady, do you remember his name in court? Q drop.
I'm trying. Are you talking
exactly
about
today? Yeah, no. Shoot.
I think I missed
Perkins Coy. Sussman. So Sussman.
Sussman.
Yeah, Sussman. No, I don't think it was Donald. Michael Sussman. Michael Sussman was in court exactly 3 years after the Q post, or 1 year after the Q post. I can't remember, but that's a Q proof. We knew about Michael Sussman before Durham even talked about him. I mean, what are the odds of that? I mean, this operation was run by somebody very close to Donald J. Trump. And, I don't care what people think, and I don't care, all these different people have their own opinions. Scott, I love how you approach it, because you just didn't study it. You didn't know it, and that's okay. But when people that have egos can't understand something, what do? They attack it. And I think the worst thing to do is attack it. I think, understanding it and understanding that it did happen. It isn't just a conspiracy, because things are happening all the time right now. News unlocks map. So they need, my bottom line is CIA is here, pray. The CIA needed Q to stop. Q was not anything like what they're saying. It was exposing the CIA. It was exposing everything, all the corruption, all the psyop.
I'd like to even add to that, Scott, your approach. You are,
I appreciate that.
You are an anomaly. In every single interface that we've done with any media anywhere, that they never ask a curious question. They never ask a curious question and listen to the answer. They already have this preconceived notion. So it kind of doesn't matter what you say. I've watched you listen to what is being said and utilize your own discernment and understand, oh, wow. Oh, I can understand that. I can see that. That makes sense to me. I'm not going to sit here and say, and I'm not expecting you to say anything regarding one way or the other, but I would believe that you would probably admit that out of all of the operators in the field that have been out there, like working in tandem with General Flynn, the way that we've been able to organize our understanding of this around Q and around Flynn as Q's target best fits with the things that you've seen over this last year, especially considering the run up to the campaign last, with everything that was happening with the delegates and the way that operation went down. That matches perfectly with what Q was saying that these people are doing.
And I'm willing to consider that. But even if and really what I think it comes down to is who was Q, but that's really not kind of that's not even the purpose of the show. But even if it isn't someone close to Trump, and even if their motivation wasn't to shut it down because it was inside information, which it may have been, it may not have been. Either way, they did infiltrate it, and there are other likely motives for doing so. But I think it's very similar to the way that they infiltrated the health and freedom movement, the election integrity movement,
yes,
and every other movement that there has been. They need to infiltrate it. They need to be inside of it so that they can control it and misdirect it. And they did that to the Tea Party movement, and so that is. I think that certainly is a big part of the whole thing, and they clearly did infiltrate it. It sounds like they did it very early on. You're talking about, so Q's first drops were in late October, I think, of 17, right?
Yep.
And you guys got in early, kind of late 17 is when you started following.
By December of 2017. InfoWars had Jordan Sather on with Roger Stone and Alex Jones, and that was the start of the usurpation of Q.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Jeff, because it was December. So one thing that a lot of people don't remember that happened right then, and when Jeff's talking about Sather was being brought to Alex Jones, Tracy Beans, the people, Pam and his girl from Patriot Soapbox, and a number of the other people all met, a praying medic, all met there in DC. And there was this initiation through Patriot Soapbox, this mass infusion of cash that created Patriot Soapbox that came up immediately on YouTube and was a 24-hour broadcasting network. It's built almost exactly the same as they built 4 years later with Badlands Media. Literally an identical operation. So their whole goal is to utilize these military assets to control every single media outlet, so that they do exactly the same thing that the Democrats do on the left. They have a mockingbird aspect, like you've watched with this Flynn stuff, with whether it's Benny or Beezy or any of these other people on Twitter for the last 3 or 4 days. It's been ad nauseum Flynn for NSA, even though Trump has clearly said it's going to be Rubio and Miller.
Right. So you said that there was money that was paid to Patriot Soapbox. And do you know where that money came from, or how much? Or
we know it was about $1 million is what it was. And the people, what was the guy's name, Jeff? Do you remember the guy that was in the background at Patriot Soapbox that would?
The Intel patches and stuff from
yes, that guy with the glasses. I can't remember his name, but I could come up with that name. Somebody out there in the Rumble chat or somewhere might remember his name.
I don't remember.
But he was the one. Him and Pam were kind of in that together. Pamphlet Anon is what his name was, and so that's basically, bro. That this is their thing. So they had the YouTube channel open, and so all of the people from the network would be logged into the YouTube channel, whether they were sleeping or whatever. It looked like there was 1,500 people watching the channel all the time.
Wow.
And so it's a similar thing going on to Badlands.
So it was like bots. It wasn't real people.
It wasn't all. Obviously, there's some real people there, but it wasn't like, they didn't have they were trying to make it look like they were more popular than they really were.
Right, and that's what Roger Stone was doing or Jason Sullivan was doing for Roger Stone, even in the 2016 election. So, do you think that he might have been involved in that?
Yes,
I do. I absolutely do. He tried to
get us. Yeah,
he tried to engineer us and tried to prove to us that Flynn was Q.
Yeah, we debunked it
pretty quickly,
and we might know. So let's just break it. Jason Sullivan said that he got with Code Monkey's dad Watkins and says make sure that Q could never post again.
That's what he told us.
Really?
Yeah.
That's what he told us, that they deactivated the trip code and Q wouldn't be able to post on 8chan or 8kun.
On 8kun, and that was in 21.
That was
No.
in 23.
Yeah, two
Oh,
years
in
ago.
23. Okay, so after the 22 election, which is about when they stopped, right?
Last year. I mean, this was like,
Right.
we had Sullivan on our show around that time.
Right.
And he kind of came in and he provided us with the information showing us. He kind of got in there with us, providing us with the information that showed us that Roger Stone was the one that made the contact with WikiLeaks. So Roger Stone makes this negative, horrible post at WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks and Julian respond to him like, "Hey, stop it! Quit associating yourself with WikiLeaks. We have nothing to do with you." And he went back and forth with them. Then the FBI used that text chain with WikiLeaks telling him to stop lying, as saying that Roger Stone is Trump's contact to WikiLeaks. Like, that was the news straight from Stone's mouth. And so Sullivan shared that with us, trying to detract us from, because Sullivan's got some skeletons in his J6 closet also.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So because of the December 31st meeting that he held, that call that Stacey Burke actually recorded.
And God bless her for that, by the way.
Yeah.
Right. Because that's the only known recording of that. And
And
that's why they targeted her.
Right. That's part of the reason. Yeah.
One part, right?
Yeah. But yeah, so in that recording, just if you don't know, this was on December 31st, a week before J6. And it was organized by a group called One Loud Voice, and they had all the Flynn people. Roger Stone had a group called the Friends of Stone, and 1AP, the First Amendment Praetorian, was on it. Proud Boys were on it. Oath Keepers, and then all of the 4 Trump groups that are all Flynn groups. Women for Trump, Latinos for Trump. All those are Flynn groups, not Trump groups. And so all of those were on there. And in it, Roger Stone is talking about how they needed to get into the Capitol. They needed to get inside. They needed to be breathing down the necks of the legislators. They needed to raise the cry of Jericho inside the halls of Congress. And he said, "I promise you, I will make this go viral and go everywhere." And
Because
that's about as clear, like smoking gun evidence of that this was a setup.
Because the coffin nail on that day would have been if the procedure had occurred and went on as normal, and we had a sponsor, we had a Senate sponsor for multiple House members that could have sent the elections back to the 10 states to be reviewed. That's what they couldn't have happened. And at the same time, they knew that they had to stop Trump from ever being able to ascend to the office again, because they were getting ready to try to kill him politically. And Roger Stone says that absolutely 100% in that movie, A Storm Foretold.
Right. Yeah, so I'm still processing what you said a minute ago there, Jeff, about Jason Sullivan telling Ron Watkins to make sure that Q could no longer post. And
Jim Watkins.
Or Jim, it was Jim Watkins.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and do you think that Jason Sullivan actually gave that tech, that this, bot tech, because that was making this whatever the software or the program was, it created bots, or it used bots in a big way to boost momentum. And Ron Watkins was recorded as saying that it made his account, because he went from a pretty small account before the election to, in 2 months' time, being, in his words, he was the second most active and powerful account on Twitter.
Maybe Jeff could give a little bit of a in-depth explanation, but it was basically something Sullivan was using with the old engineering of Twitter and manipulating the algorithm.
Yeah. And it was like a tweet deck kind of thing. I can't remember exactly what it was called at the time, but yeah, Vandersteel used it. They all started using it, and it allowed them to go further than anybody else because of the algorithms. And maybe
that's part of the reason why I think Trump was retweeting Ron Watkins. And to
see how it happened, to see what was happening to the post, maybe.
Right.
Yeah.
Certainly, it made it so that he was seen as, the expert in what was happening. And in
let's be honest, that when it went to 8kun, Ron Watkins was popular because he was Code Monkey,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so there could be a little bit of sway in that embellishment, possibly.
Sure.
Because I grew to 250,000 followers. I had 200. What did I have, Shady, when I left?
275.
Yeah, 275,000 followers. So I broke somebody
his
out.
account was just growing. I mean, his account was just growing so fast because we were publishing. We weren't just publishing the Q drops. We were publishing what we could aggregate together with our team around the information. Because when Q was explaining that disinformation was necessary, Q was explaining that about the activity and about what we were doing to the players, not the information. So Q understood that we would be able to discern information through the veil of immediate actions. And that immediate action response was causing these people in the field like Mueller and Rosenstein. They were going on TV and saying some crazy stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, like they were like, we're like, what? And they were answering to it. Like we started to see that the feds were answering to Q, and then the media were answering to Q.
And
And then
Yahoo
also,
would answer to my account even
exactly
too.
over and over.
You know, and so what I'd like to also point out is that, you know, we do know now, in fact, that the military, the wall was funded in the military budget, right? We all know that now.
Yep.
I'm the one that figured that out back in the day, Scott, in regards to Red Castle, Green Castle. That's a Q post. So Q even said Anons knew long ago, but we couldn't tell you. So, you know, this is basically it. Red Castle, Green Castle, the Red Castle, Green Castle. That's how they funded the wall. And it's funny how that post, and I'll just kind of just scroll up. Look at how many times this post was used. Look at how many times I was queued with this post. This is thanking the guy for Red Castle, Green Castle. Thank you. Look at how many times there was a 0 delta with President Trump. I know you can't see full screen, but I'm just showing you that was the biggest thing. And then here I am on Hillary's list. So it's just, oh, sorry. So just, you know, just to kind of show you, this is, you know, these are my cues, guys. And, you know, this is, let me just show you, Scott, this is the red. See that? That's my meme with my little finger. It was a 0 delta right here. This is me in the matrix status. Okay. 0 delta from today. Wow. Thank you, Patriot. They used it again. Army Chief of Engineers. Thank you to the Anon that figured this out. This is a better picture of it. You can see my status right here in the matrix of 3 X's. Okay. I did that. When was this? Let me go all the way down, because this post, this is how many times I was queued because of this post. And it was in 12/11/2018. Pretty interesting.
So I mean, you guys were really a part of that history, which is pretty cool.
We really were, and that's what the interesting thing. That's what we kind of wanted to be, and you know, in real time, and what we sort of thought that was going to parlay into would be to these people that were around wanting to understand the research that we had done, but no one was curious about it. And then whenever we started finding the Arabella stuff and with the biolab stuff, you know, this was after we were thrown off, after, you know, the whole operation for Red Pill Roadshow that Brian Gamble created. They created that because they couldn't figure out who we were. They couldn't figure out what we were doing. They couldn't understand who the Q people, why are these people with Q running over our narratives like freight trains for every single time we turn around and we can't get a word in edgewise. We've got 3.5. Q even outed the McChrystal 3.5 million soldier bots and tagged the video of Flynn saying we have, you know, an army of digital soldiers. We thought, oh my God, Flynn was setting up for Q ahead of time so that we would all work together to take these people down. That was the vernacular at the time. That's what people were. That's what Liz Crokin and all these people that were around it, and Jordan Sather and Praying Medic. That's what all these people were feeding into the system. And so it was a, you know, go along to get along in a big way. Like we kind of all just like, you know, drank that Kool-Aid in real time.
So there was the $1 million that went to the Patriot Soapbox. Do you know where that came from?
We do not know where we assume that came from some sort of 501c4 somewhere. Now seeing like, you know, at that point, we didn't, yeah, you know, like we have no idea where it came from. And I have an idea of where the money that went to Badlands came from.
Well, we know exactly where that came from.
Where's that? Could you say?
Yeah, Cameron Moore. I don't really care anymore.
I don't care either. Just Cameron Moore. That's who did it.
I've said it many times, and nobody wants to do the story on that guy.
Yeah.
Cameron Moore.
Okay.
He's the guy that's got the membership at Mar-a-Lago that Roger Stone utilizes to make everybody think that he is.
No, that's not true. It's another person at Mar-a-Lago, but he does, but he does use a membership. Roger Stone. I was there. You guys remember the Mar-a-Lago scene with Roger Stone in A Storm Foretold? I was there that night
when it was filmed.
When
Roger Stone was there with
I
his
was there.
crew.
You can see me in the background, in fact. So Roger Stone is sitting with that. She was a Florida. When I met the Florida girl, she was like a Florida model. She won Miss Florida. She had an ankle bracelet on for ripping off her aunt and all this other stuff. She was a Roger Stone person. They're hanging with that person. And then she went to Real Voice. I can't remember her name. Blonde hair.
Yeah, I remember blonde hair.
Friends with Ann Vandersteel. They're all connected, Scott. It's that bad. I mean, you could like, we're just remembering something like, oh my God, that, oh my God, that. It's but it all started in Discord, Shady. I mean, Shady and I were called into Discord, and then they saw how good we were together.
That's a good point to make up too, because what happened was the two of us, it ended up being the Jeff and Shady show inside the Discord server, and these people were incensed. We were taking over their space, and everybody was asking us questions, and so they started like seeding all of these stuff, and like telling me, like they started sending the girls in the Discord server to tell me things that Jeff had done. And then I'm like sending the messages to Jeff. I'm like, dude, why'd you do this? And then he's sending the stuff to me. He's like, well, why'd you do that? People are nuts.
It was kind of funny.
That's fun. So it really, the Flynn Network really, I mean, it's in the last 4 years is when it's kind of taken off to the point where people really do recognize it and that this is a thing. And we can say Flynn Network and people will have an idea, even if they haven't heard anything from us, of some of who of those people might be.
Correct. And one thing I want to talk about too is like Badlands Media. Again, we were sent by Kash Patel's friend Eric Reinhold Media to stop with the devolution bullshit. And then then I said, why don't you guys, all you Badlands people go to Badlands, and all you, We the Media people stay here. They couldn't do it because they were Flynn people. Okay. Knowing what I know now, but this is Reinhold. This is Eric Reinhold reposting. Okay. Via Reinhold to help expose We the Media and Badlands and devolution. He hated Kash Patel hates John Patel Patriot, guys. Hates.
Just to give you a bit of a background on him, so Kash Patel had never been on social media. And so when he came to created his True Social account, he was inundated by all of these digital soldiers screaming devolution at him. And he's like, oh, no, and he kind of played it along. He was actually kind of being fun with the Q people initially. So he thought he was going to be fun. And then it turned into all these devolution people that were because literally, Scott, the way that it came about, the devolution stuff started in like November or late October of 2020.
So right before the election.
Literally right around, literally when the election happened, he was there with devolution, almost immediately claiming that, there was this alternative plan or all this nonsense. And so everybody in the Q movement and Simon Parks, Charlie Ward, Wayne Willett, Wano say, all these people came at the same time. Everybody thought that Patel Patriot was Kash Patel. Right. And so everybody thought that. Patel will say and claim, oh, nobody thought that. And all his minions say that. It's complete crap. Everybody thought that.
Actually, I was not in Q, but I remember hearing that at that time, that was Kash Patel. So,
and he was promoting it like he was. He was writing it like he was Kash Patel.
Right. Wow. So that is, I did not know that they had that going like right before or, immediately after the election. So,
and it looks like that it came from Thomas Victor is like where it came from. So they had this I think that they had this already. I think that they understood.
Flynn was in the Thomas Victor room. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that they understood that there was this thirst for military action through the Q drops, because Q had made everyone think that, this whole thing with the military was going to happen, which I think now was a perfect psychological operation to undermine what they were trying to do and to drive into some common sense into people in the long run. Yes, it took a long time and it's a lot of BS out there, but we do have to understand that you have to liquefy reality to make their psychological operation null and void.
Right. So what was if you were to summarize the thesis of the devolution, what was it that they were promoting? What were the core ideas?
So the core ideas
the Insurrection Act.
Yep. That Donald Trump had implemented these specific executive orders and was acting behind the scenes as as this military tribunal thing played out, and all of the people were brought to justice, and we were all pretending like Joe Biden was the president.
Wow, that's really huge, because that
It is.
shows that even as, because what I've reported extensively on how they had a plan from the moment they really just within days of the election to access, and they were using Stacey Burke because she had made a phone call about a little over a year earlier into the White House to try to warn Trump about Flynn's connections with Mark Zaid and others. And so she made that, as soon as she made that call, she had people befriending her, that one person on the right, one person on the left. The one on the right, his name was Dan Minnick. He's long-term friends with Tim Ballard and Ray Epps. and then the day in the days after the election, this Dan Minnick guy gets her on the phone and hooks her up with his cousin in Seattle that was with the FedEx containers of ballots or boxes of ballots, bags of ballots, whatever it was, after the election. And then she started getting calls from so many people drawing her into this, and other things happened, drawing her into the Korean Air plane full of ballots thing. And then they were going to use that to get her they were trying to get her to sign an affidavit. They're going to use that to get a FISA warrant. And they told her that they already had the FISA warrant application written. They're going to use that FISA warrant to do an ambush audit at the Maricopa County Election Center in November of 2020. And they said it was only going to last like a week or so. And they were going to do that in order to create probable cause, that because they were going to find garbage. It wouldn't have proven fraud in a court of law. They would have found malfeasance and reason, to create a reasonable suspicion, and it would have created so much chaos. On top of that, it would have created a constitutional crisis, and so I think that they were hoping, the whole idea behind that was to force Trump's hand into invoking the Insurrection Act. But at the same time, what you guys are saying is that the devolution group was creating a narrative machinery within the Flynn network
for that
to prep
yes.
to get a popular support for that right out the bat.
A pressure campaign,
and that's a piece that I hadn't seen before. So that's like, really awesome.
Like a pressure campaign similar to what you're seeing right now. And that's exactly what happened. And it was leading right into the whole thing. And Patrick Berg brags about what they did, the whole specifics of what they did by getting next to Trump and trying to get him to sign that Insurrection Act. And then Jeff, talking about the McInerney and Vandersteel ballroom event that they did like 3 or 4 days before that. They inserted this whole Ann Vandersteel reported on her show specifically through this whole theatrical thing with the music in the background that Donald Trump had in fact already signed the Insurrection Act.
Troy says.
And all of these devolution people were like piling right into the center, flooding the zone. And we were to some degree like caught up in it, but we were also like, how does this constitutionally make any sense? This is our conversation. It's like, how can you constitutionally say you're going to, this guy's going to be elected, but he's not elected. You're going to do that. They were trying to say there was going to be some sort of hanging of Biden and crew in March after he had been inaugurated. It's not that much different than what Ranklin and these idiots are saying right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, Ranklin was running a parallel track to that at that time with the Operation Pence card, and
yes.
which was using similar ideas, just framed in slightly different language. And
that's the first and last time we had him on our show. When
we
really
bring him on for that one. That was the only one. He got that one by us.
Yeah.
Okay, so that leads to, at what point did you guys realize, okay, Flynn is not who he says he is, and you're surrounded by this network of this?
So for me, and then I'll let Shady. For me, I had feelings before we even came public about it, just because how the network didn't really embrace us. They didn't share us. They didn't, talk about Paysur. They didn't talk about any of the Q stuff that, they just talked about whatever they wanted to, and everybody had all these huge egos. But really, it was to stuff us under the carpet. I just want to stop you. So just to be clear, it wasn't really you guys so much
that they were rejecting. It was the ideas and
My
the
research.
information, the information that you were digging up. They had no interest in that information.
Correct.
And they were boxing you out because of the research that you guys were doing. So it's not so much that
Correct.
this was an ego thing that you're describing.
It was
It's
their ego thing. Yeah.
right. Go on.
But that-
And
let's-
which is the same thing that they do within state Republican parties that got me into all of this, where they
Mhm.
box out the people that are capable, that know how to get out the vote and how to support candidates. They box them out, and they have no
People
interest in
threaten
those
them.
people. Right. And they defame them. They call them rhinos. They call them establishment. And then, yeah.
So, so I kind of had ideas, and I'm like talking to Alex because I'm in We the Media. Shady's not. The reason I went into We the Media is like, Jordan, how come you guys don't share any of my stuff? I'm about ready to blow the whistle on you because Jordan Sather has quite a history with Roger Ramseur Richards, who has a Satan sigil, and Corey kids. He's a Corey's kid, who Corey and Ramseur took over the Gaia movement. Then they took over the UFO movement, then the Gaia movement. Then they were coming for Q along with Patrick Byrne because Roger Ramseur Richards produced the Deep Rig. They're all connected. Okay. That's what we have to understand. Everybody that you are following are probably all connected, except for Scott, me, and Shady.
That Roger guy, so he was the filmmaker that made Deep Rig.
Yep.
He also made a movie with Joe Flynn and Robert David Steele that was released almost within days of the election. Maybe
Robert David Steele is Cag Drogo. Chad Vivas is uncle.
Yep.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So the Drogo guy, that that's he was like he came to the movement by like wearing a Matrix Groove shirt in his city council meeting, standing up at a city council meeting or a school board meeting or whatever it was in his Matrix Groove shirt. That's how he got brought. Then he came into our group, and he was all like friends with us over in Telegram for the whole time where we were off of YouTube before we came to Rumble and all this different stuff. And then as soon as we started talking about this, and I don't think Jeff finished explaining the thing about Flynn, so I want him to get back to that.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, I mean,
I distracted him too.
We could have a 5-hour conversation. I'm serious.
Well, we may have to do this in parts, which would be awesome. So
then,
thank you for asking the questions.
Yeah, no, and I started asking, talking to Shady, and and then I started talking to Alex because I'm in the We the Media chat with them. I'm like, look at this with Flynn, look at that with Flynn, and we started doing a lot of research. Okay. And we were like, holy moly. And then we kind of, maybe split We the Media up with Cash Patel and Reinhold. And they got all mad and butthurt, and they all blocked me and all that other stuff, which is good. I don't care because they're all idiots. That's Awakened Outlaw, guys. That's Sather. That's Patel Patriot. That's Kate the Awakening or whatever her name
Deluxe.
Pepe Deluxe. That's who else? I mean, let's keep going because you guys need to know who all these people are.
Sir William Scott, Gunfag,
Sir William Scott, all of them, and they're all asshats. So then we were, understanding, what was going on, and kind of going, oh my God, Flynn kind of was going to sell nukes to Saudi Arabia. America is no longer for sale is a Q post, so he was going to sell nukes, and he had it all drawn up, ready to go, and that's mainstream news. But then you're like, oh, are you going to believe ABC? Is or whatever? That's what they say. But you have to kind of weed through all that too. But Donald Trump on 8/8/2023 was our go. That was our signal to go ahead and tell you exactly what happened with General Flynn and be the whistleblowers that we are today, because he made sure that Keith Kellogg came out and endorsed him in 8/8/2023, and he thanked Keith Kellogg. And you've got to read the book. You got to read it. It's the most accurate depiction of what happened inside the Oval Office in the White House in my days. And chapter 8 is Out Like Flynn, who didn't meet with a lawyer, who was set up, who lied to Trump. Then Keith Kellogg's dragged into the testimony with the lovers and Peter Strzok, and my God. So that's what happened. But what's interesting is, Shady, that date, 8/8/2015 is when Roger Stone was fired. 8/8, what was the other one, Shady? 8/8/22,
whenever the raid happened.
22 was the raid on Mar-a-Lago. And 8/8 is when Donald Trump posted Kellogg about Out Like Flynn. Pretty interesting.
And so we effectively, so whenever that happened, okay, so you imagine this is 23, later in August of 23. We have been on the air for however long, since the beginning of 19. And we have been pro Flynn ever since the beginning. You know, we've never really said derogatory things about him. We had read these things. We had understood these things. We knew these things, and we had started to engineer the things that we talked about on our show without including them, because we didn't want to talk about them. We had seen the way that we, all these different things that happened. All this stuff happened with the media. But when we saw that in the book, we understood very clearly that this was the reason for everything that we had gone through. For everything that we had gone through from the moment that we met one another, going back to before that, it all cascaded into both of our minds to realize, listen, this is connected to every bit of it. The digital soldiers, the defeat disinfo, the Stanley McChrystal, the idea that Flynn and McChrystal are somehow, contentious with one another is the most absurd lie you could possibly imagine if you spend 3 seconds thinking about it. And so we also knew that this was going to be a great detriment to what the community that we had, because a lot of these people that we just mentioned were still there pretending to consuming our show every day. They were there every day watching. And so, we had no choice. If we either had to quit what we were doing, or we had to report what we understood to be true.
So let me tell you about this too, because we had this fake fight with Flynn and Lynn Wood, right? Remember all that happening? This is a post, 4637. It says, "You are witnessing the greatest coordinated disinformation campaign ever to be launched against the American people. Information warfare, infiltration versus invasion, insurgency, irregular warfare, efforts to regain power." And then it goes to a Trump tweet, and it says, "Digital soldiers, hashtag fight back." Fight back is Flynn's foundation, or Lynn Wood's foundation. Loyalists. And then patriots are where we go one, we go all. So Q told us a long time ago about Flynn in many different ways, in not a good way.
Right. So, and so you guys came out in August of 2023. So that was coming up on about a year and a half ago, a little more, almost 2 years ago. And since then you've been, and I think I've read all of your guys' threads and everything since then. And you've done a lot. You've done a whole lot to educate people about, just the factual things that Flynn has done against Trump and MAGA. And that's kind of the central thesis here, is that, and it's not just Flynn. He's part of a network. I don't know about you guys, but I don't think he's a mastermind.
No.
Are we live, Scott? Scott? I'm the mastermind. Scott. He's so egotistical, he would have to take credit for being the mastermind.
There's a pottery mold outside of Flynn's house that's closer to the mastermind.
They used to make fun of him in the intel. They said they called it Flynn truths.
Yes.
So the intel agents also made fun of Flynn.
Yeah.
Flynn facts.
Flynn
facts. That's what it was. Yeah. Flynn facts. Yeah.
We got to bring that back.
Yeah.
Flynn's going to be the NSA advisor. Flynn fact.
So I've been told that within the family that it's his sister Barbara that really kind of runs the show within the family. But I'm wondering, do you guys have any thoughts about like going higher up than Flynn? Like who's calling the shots?
Obama, Hillary.
Well, and also
Brennan.
And whenever we talk about the network, what Q said was something very, very critical that a lot of people don't realize. Scott, Q said something that this is one of the reasons that I decided to pay attention to it, because Q said to follow the wives. There's a reason that you follow the wives. And the reason that you follow the wives is because the bloodline genealogy that is going on within the architecture of the quote unquote cabal that these people are a part of. So whenever you follow Flynn's wife, you figure out where the aristocracy comes in. You've got to look for the aristocracy. And that's exactly what Q was mentioning, talking about these bloodline families and the way that they operate. For instance, a child born into a family doesn't grow up in the family in which it's born into. It is passed along to someone else, and it grows up, and it's not a Pesor, it's a Romney. It's not a Pesor, it's a Biden. It's not a Pesor, it's a Clinton. And so this is the way that they're actually, this is biblical stuff. This goes all the way back to, pre-Babylon.
So we're talking about the Pesors, which is the French bloodline. So born in 1959, Middletown, Rhode Island, Lori Andrade is a Caucasian housewife, presumed to be of French descent. Her surname is Gaelic. Definitely best known to the world is Lori Flynn. She was also was it Helen Francis Andrews? One of her bloodlines is royalty in Portugal.
Yes.
One of Helen Flynn? Was it Helen Flynn?
No, Lori Flynn. Lori Andrade.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like whenever you say, you're asking the question, who's calling the shots? Okay, so this is a cabal network, and literally you're not seeing any of the principles. The only thing you're seeing is puppets. One side down the other. You're not seeing any principles anywhere.
Clapper, Brennan, all of them are puppets.
All of them are puppets.
Right.
Every one of them. None of these people are, Hillary Clinton is, just as dumb as General Flynn.
Hey, I think my wife is a little smarter.
Well, you're not even in the conversation, Bill. You're like,
But I think that if the bullet on July 13th had gone a quarter inch to the right, I think that we would have a President Flynn today, and it really wouldn't be that much different from President Obama or President.
Because of your
Biden.
research of the delegates, yes, I believe you're right, and that was scary, bro. Great research on that. So. The one thing that we also noticed, and Dan Scavino made mention of it, stop calling me. And if you didn't endorse, Trump the minute he asked, the minute he announced, then I'm not going to be talking to you. Flynn endorsed 10 days before Trump got shot.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And notice that, and we were just noticing today that Dan Scavino is posting those similar memes right now with this crazy pressure campaign. If you're not noticing, everyone, there's a intelligence agency global pressure campaign to force Donald Trump to think that General Flynn is his only option as the NSA director. Therefore, whenever Trump does not pick Flynn, they will turn on him and they will say Donald Trump is an idiot and he is controlled by his handlers like Pam Bondi and whoever else. And General Flynn is going to be your best fix to take care of this in the future. Like, that's where this is going.
Yep. So there was I want to try to get through the whole arc of kind of the story of the Flynn network, because it really did start, and we spent a lot of time talking about the Q influencer network, which he very, and it's interesting that was infiltrated from the very beginning. Yep. It sounds like, in fact, you guys were brought into what you said is we were brought into Discord where it all started.
We were called.
You were called by Flynn people. So the Discord itself,
I would say Flynn and Hillary people, but go ahead.
Okay. Right. Sure.
I guess.
Sure. Well, yeah, I mean, there's so many. I mean, Flynn was endorsed even at that time by so many different Democrats, and and he was a Democrat even then. He's a lifetime
2022, correct?
Right. Yeah, it wasn't until he started infiltrating Republican parties that he actually switched to become a Republican.
I got to go sign this thing.
So they really created this whole Discord thing. This was like a military intelligence operation, and they were using that to draw people in and really control become the gatekeeper on a big sense between the Q drops and the people that were teaching people, what these Q drops were about, and where they were leading the research and that kind of thing.
It is, and one key aspect of this is to understand that whenever Q was talking about Five Eye, Q was talking about FVEY, Five Eye, talking about the Australia, Canada, New Zealand, America, Britain. We're spying on each other's people. Mm-hmm. So within that network, you've got to have operational support. So now, all these people, they had code names, they knew each other, it was Searcher of this, it was Deer Hunter, it was like all of these Joe Patriot, like all these names that they already had, these names that they already existed, and they already knew each other, and they were coexisting. Like, this server knew that this server was associated with these people, and none of us really knew anything other than they were like what you would consider like a honeypot. As people, tons of Q people were coming into these Discord channels, and they were like bringing them in and grinding them up and spitting them out as fast as they could come in. But for whatever reason, we were immune to their BS.
I mean, it seems to me that they must have known that Q was coming, or that something like that was coming.
We thought that
they were so organized. I mean, it wasn't just a reactionary thing, because it would take months to react. to something like that. But here it's just, you're talking weeks.
But you're also talking about, let me, if I were to go pull up the list of countries in which we are currently, as our clown intelligence agency, are maintaining an operational presence among the government of that country, you would realize like how huge this operation actually is. And the trafficking lanes and the trafficking networks and the human and the drug smuggling and all these different things that everybody thinks that, is somehow some sort of like, cartel member. They're not connecting it to your generals. They're not connecting it to the military, which is the people with the C-37s that can move the material from, Saudi Arabia to the Philippines.
They were already organized because they were already operational elsewhere, is what Demos said. And I agree with that statement.
Interesting. Okay. So then we have the, kind of the arc of the Q influencer movement, which really led up to 2020. Right. And then there was devolution that was kind of like a splinter in a way. And then what happened after and starting in 2021 was the Clay Clark Reawaken tour and all of that. And then at the same time, Clay Clark was doing these podcaster summits where he was recruiting people, and they were using technology that would identify influencers, and
we got a picture of the whole board that they got.
Right. Yeah. That, and I've published that too. And that's that is, so that they had that influencer map, but they were also using this technology that would identify these people, even when they're small. And
I think Flynn had that a long time ago. He followed me on April of 2018.
Right. And that's actually not that much different from what Cambridge Analytica was. So
right.
I think it's kind of an offshoot of that.
Shannon and associated with, Cambridge, associated with the Fabian Society, Tavistock, like all of these different,
right.
Shannon, Mercer, like all of these different people are really, like Bannon and these people were the leakers. Flynn and these people were the leakers. They were the ones that had the meetings in there. Yeah. And what you were just describing there, they seeded the Q people right at the end of the election because they had a sense that Q was going to have to go away. So they needed to flood the zone. And it was Simon Parks. Simon Parks wasn't around during the Q drops.
I just had an epiphany. Plants need water. Plants need leakers. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, exactly.
Right.
Because like this is literally what they were all doing. Like Simon Parks, what was his name? Jaco, the Truth Hammer guy, Scott something. I can't even remember his name. He's made Scott McKay, so Flynn brought these people into his network, but then he goes out and he says, "Oh, you're a bunch of morons if you think there's some sort of secret plan." And then he came out on the 5th of January that year and said, "I guarantee you 110% Donald Trump is going to be the president for the next 4 years." Right after what I was just discussing with Anderson.
Let's focus on that real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
General Flynn said that Donald Trump was going to be the next president on January 5th, 2021. 110% guarantee. Why are we still following him?
That's a great question.
Because that didn't happen.
Right.
This guy's got
I mean, you could. It's such a long list. I mean, of things that he predictions and false prophecies that he is a false prophet, and
he was on Benny again today.
Yeah.
Right.
And the president hasn't called him yet.
Yeah. He said I'm ready to serve. I'm ready to do the job.
He turned down 10 positions. When were you ready? You're gonna Scott, Donald Trump came to you and offered you anything. Donald Trump comes say, "Scott, man, will you come be my dog catcher? What are you doing?"
I'd find the way.
I'd find a way. My ass would be in DC in 3 seconds.
Yep. So and I think that probably speaks for just about everybody on this podcast. But so we've got this really strong transition after the 2020 election, and that 2020 election was a pivotal thing, and they were very well prepared. And so we're talking about serious premeditation in trying to entrap Trump into invoking the Insurrection Act. And what and I know you guys have talked about this, and I've talked about this, but it bears repeating. Had Trump invoked the Insurrection Act that day, what the document called for is the Secretary of Defense to have the military by force confiscate all of the ballots and machines in the 7 swing counties and they would have done a hand recount first. And part of the premeditation in this was they convinced all of us that it was machine fraud, that was that's where it was. And so and there was machines flipping votes specifically, creating votes out of thin air. And so a hand recount naturally would have caused that, or would have caught that. And everybody expected that we were made to expect that a hand recount would catch the fraud. And so that's where naturally they would have started. It would have confirmed the tabulator count, however, because they went to great pains to make sure that there was a ballot for every vote. And every hand recount that's been done from the 2020 election has confirmed the tabulator account.
And what's funny is, like, the recount that they had in Arizona found more votes for Biden.
Right.
Paid for by the Flynn group.
Right. Yeah, it can go the other way because they were injecting so many ballots, and once a paper ballot goes through the tabulator, there's no way of telling whose ballot that was, and there's no way of distinguishing it from any other ballot. So, anybody who continues to say we got to fix 2020 first, we got to figure, we're never going to catch the fraud.
I mean, we're being attacked by Jovan Pulitzer now too.
I have been from the beginning as well. So,
and then that whole network of Pulitzer, Altman, Keschel, all of the people, Lynn Wood, like Lynn Wood has been, like all the people, it's like nothing but 2020 this, 2020 that. Right. That's all a psyop. You're not going to do anything to 2020. Nobody's going to figure anything out. All of this nonsense that, if you look at that brief, if you take a look at that brief that Sidney Powell filed, we were the two of us by ourselves. We're like trying to be supportive, and we were like the misspellings and the mischaracterizations of things that were written. It looked like you literally grabbed something like copy and paste from like 10 years ago and threw it on a document and tried to file it in court. We were like, what the hell is going on here?
Right.
It was all facade. And I mean, between Sidney and Patrick and Flynn and Lynn Wood, I would say that they raised about $130 million in that couple of months.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I think that's about right.
I didn't mean to get you, but yes. So Lindell, Dr. Frank, Joe Altman, David Clements, they're all talking about the machines. So go ahead. I'm sorry. I want to
and even with the the stuff that led into Greg Phillips.
Wow. Yeah. And then Greg Phillips, we had him on the show. Oh, geez.
Flannel Friday.
You guys had everybody.
we did. Well, we were trying. We would do the same thing again. Like right now, we'd have you again. We love having you. We had script on. That's what we thought we were supposed to do. Like we're sharing our space. We have these wonderful people. Yep. We were bringing people on to trick them.
Right. Well, and to that end, Script Keeper says that he's got his show watching our show. So you're awesome, Script. Thank you so much.
God bless America. Where we go, what we go all.
That's right. That's awesome. So to land that plane though, had Trump had they done that, had Trump had the military go in, confiscate these ballots, do a hand recount, and it confirms the fraud or confirms the tabulator tally, then it would have been instantly labeled a military coup attempt.
Yep.
I mean, we saw what happened, the way that they instantly labeled January 6th an insurrection. They would have instantly labeled this a military coup attempt and treason.
Yeah. And they would have hung Trump.
And the majority of Americans, the rational middle, would have all agreed. And the Constitution, that treason is one of the only crimes in the Constitution where there's a prescribed penalty and punishment, and that is hanging. So,
I honestly believe the reality that they didn't get him to sign that Insurrection Act is the reason that you had the event on July the 13th and the other event with the numbnut from Ukraine. With that,
and the lawfare and everything else.
All of it, yes. And like all the people out there trying to say all these different things that were acting like Donald Trump is saying this and Donald, like it has been an unbelievable wake. We're all in the wake of this. And the truth of the matter is, at the core of it, what he's doing for us, like look at what's happening to the price of gold right now. Your wealth is growing in a way you do not understand what's happening. And by him bringing all these people together, like whether it be Flynn or whether it be Mark Cuban, they're all invested in China. They've thrown their whole ass in China, and they bet everything on China. And right now, China is stuck. There are actually protests breaking out in the streets right now in China due to the economic distress that's going on there. So what Trump is doing is he is reconfiguring this military cesspool that thinks that it operates from this communist center in Korea and China. And it's at the be. And look at Milley. I mean, Milley is a Flynn student. He was defending China while Trump was still in office.
He was leaking to China. So
literally,
what I want to do too is one of the first posts. You know, Q started October 28th, 2017. This is 3 days later, 2 days later, 4 days later, 11/1/2017. Think about it logically. The only way is the military fully controlled, save and spread once 11.3 verifies his first marker. Big advanced drop on poll. So everybody's like, the military is the only way. We're going to win. We got to use the military. But no, it was the only way is the military fully controlled. People leave that out. So if you look at January 6th, the military stood down. Charlie Flynn, Piat, Bowser, you know, all and General Flynn and Roger Stone and the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys are all running around, you know, creating the optic of you being violent, man. That's what that was.
It absolutely was.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, that's absolutely what they were after for sure. So, and this is something that we're probably going to have to do a part 2 just to talk about what's happened since 2020. But I want to kind of get into an overview on it, which is that they were creating, and we said it a few minutes ago, but you know, that they went on the Reawaken tour, which was not just like a concert tour. I mean, this was an operation with a purpose, and you guys traveled with that. So
yeah.
So I'd like to hear your perspective on what the Reawaken tour was and why it was.
We thought it was going to be a great opportunity because we were still like, oh wow, this is cool, and you know, and they needed us, I think, and we're like, how come we can't speak? You know, I had 200,000 followers, you know, we got a pretty big podcast, but we were never allowed to speak. They're like, you can be media, so they kept us there so we could keep. They were using us as their channel, as the on ramp for the deep stake, basically. Shady.
And from our perspective,
and we started learning stuff and observing and going, Shady, what's going on? Go ahead.
Right. Yeah. We went to Oklahoma, and you know, we saw kind of what happened there. That was the whole thing that happened with Lynn Wood. Lynn Wood was on the stage and he was screaming about, oh, send it to the Vatican, Clay. And he was like touting all these Q things, acting like he was part of or associated with the Q movement.
Wearing our bracelet,
getting everybody all riled up, and you know, making everybody think that, you know, and we did an interview with him. We interviewed Patrick Byrne, we interviewed General Flynn. It was some of our first contact with any of these people. And what was interesting whenever we came away from it was we literally, I mean, I guess it's naive. We thought they wanted to talk to us. But what really turned out to be is they wanted us there so we could amplify their message. Yep. We went there to
clout chasers.
Yeah, we went there to push the message of freedom. We went there to push the message of MAGA. We went there to say that there is something going on within the world that people don't see, and Q is exposing it, and it's very corrupt. That's what we went there to do. And then they wouldn't let us speak. We thought, okay, we'll do this one, they'll let us speak. Oh no. And so what it ended up being was, you know, we didn't get to participate in their networks of finance, and so it was a drain on our personal finances.
Right.
And if we'd have kept on, I mean, like you know, you fly to this place, you set up, get rooms, you rent a car, like all these different things that you're doing, and then we were like, you know, that's not. I didn't, you know.
We crashed an event that in Tampa area, Fort Myers. Shady, remember we crashed that event with that scumbag Thompson guy, right, and Brian Gamble and General Flynn, and we crashed it. We sponsored $5,000 via a fan, paid for it for us, and we were able to walk in the dinner, and they're like, oh my god, who are these people?
That was Gamble. They were there, they were having this big meeting. They did not expect
with some guy named Thompson, Mike Thompson, who's a scumbag in and of himself as well. And they're the ones taking over the local action, taking over your local politics, Tampa, over there in Fort Myers, and, you know, everywhere else. You know, Scott, that's what they're, you know, when Flynn says local action, national results, it's not a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that one very enlightening point about that maybe would be that every single person that ever went to a Reawaken tour got their tickets through Clay's phone.
Yep.
And if you know anything about intelligence operations, it's about a center point where everything moves through. So that phone, every single person that got, so he can with just a push of a button communicate with any of these people, and they have their information in his phone. So it's like if you want to talk about a massive gathering of patriot, like you can't blackmail people until you know who they are, and then once you know who they are, you find their weakness. They wanted to blackmail us. They tried everything. They didn't. So many different times they tried to guess who I was, Scott. On the Chan boards before they knew who I was. It was like literally 3.5 years.
They doxed me and my daughter.
Every single name they doxed Jeff because Jeff trusted these people to know what his real Facebook was. That's how they doxed him. The few of these people that were in Discord knew what his real name was on his Facebook that he trusted, that they went out and took that information and started leaking it on the internet and still being friends with him and pretending like, they're consoling him as it's happening to him.
So I got something cool for you. So we broke the news on 8/8 of 2023. I got a message from Clay Clark saying,
we can't see it, but you're close.
No, you
General
can see it.
Flynn,
there you go.
Meet Jeff from the MG show.
What day is that?
August 15th, 2023.
That's less than a week later.
So a week after you outed him.
And we knew General Flynn. I mean, come on.
Right. That's funny because Clay Clark came to when I was in Tulsa. And I was a nobody. I met a bunch of. Well, thanks. I met a bunch of. I was at the national convention, and while I was there, I met some delegates from Oklahoma, and they just invited me to come out. They paid my airfare, and they let me stay on their couches.
Here's not control these people for us,
right? And they thought that this was like this big organized speaking tour, that I was paid thousands of dollars. And
who pays you?
Yeah, exactly. That from the very beginning, that was the question. But Clay Clark and Jackson Lawmeyer showed up in Tulsa at that presentation, and I was surprised at the end of it. Clay Clark comes up to me, and he's so eager to give me his phone number. and he wants to have me. He says he wants to have me on his show, and so it is the same kind of thing. I think
the problem is we get more views and we get more traction on our show than Clay gets on his show.
Well, he was. Remember, he was telling you. He was saying, "Do you know who I have number of in my phone?" Like that was his argument. Like Scott lays out this whole case of all this corruption from these people, and he's like, "Do you realize I got Donald Trump's number in my phone?" Like, bro, nobody asked about that.
Yeti just texted me that I have to clean my phone screen. Shady.
I'm trying to do the same thing.
Yeti.
Get the gunk off your screen, bro.
I had some viewers tell me I had to clean the windows behind me.
And by the way, we are not funded by anybody but the beautiful people that are watching you today. We see a lot of our fans out there. Not fans, because we're family, actually. I mean, I don't like to call them fans or followers because, we are truth seekers and we're learning together. And Scott, I'm proud to call you that as well, because we're learning together as well. And, we come from a different ilk than you do, and then Script Keeper came in and other people that are doing their research, and we all came to the same conclusion, and I think that needs to be highlighted, Scott.
Yeah, for sure.
It's very interesting.
The evidence is overwhelming, and I think we all followed the evidence in different ways, and it truly, it's not an exaggeration, it's overwhelming. It is everywhere you look.
And the truth is, we have a responsibility, guys. The truth is that this thing right here is supposed to be a responsibility. We're speaking up for the people that this network has harmed. Okay, all these people that want to say, "Oh, you're saying this because you're paid." No, I'm speaking up for the Stacey Burks of the world. I'm speaking up for the people that these people have ran over like a bulldozer in a freight train with nobody being able to say anything edgewise. And then it's like, oh, you got Roger Stone and Alex Jones attacking you and all these people coming down on you. Most people retreat into their home and say, okay, enough of this. We can't do that. We can't do that and save America. We have to profess the truth. If you're a believer, you're supposed to profess the truth.
And you should see all the great DMs we get, and I'm sure you get them too, Scott. It's if we can affect just one person, our job is done. And it's more than that. And we're just so thankful and just blessed.
Yeah,
we are blessed.
Well, I really appreciate you guys taking the time and being so generous with
fun.
And your support and everything else. We do, because
the best person that's ever interviewed me.
I know. You're the best interviewer ever.
Really?
Thank you so much.
I
Wow.
think so. You're the
Hey,
most curious. You're
How
actually
are Shady and
curious.
I doing with our counseling?
See, I thought this went great. Well,
Mhm.
it ended up at Indian leg wrestling, Scott. Like that's how we hash everything out now.
It was
Well,
Guitar Anon, one of our favorite followers. He's the one that said that, maybe, Jeff got mad at Shady because he interrupted him. Maybe they need counseling. And he was right.
He was right. It totally worked. And I was completely interrupting him.
you just need some marriage counseling, right?
Oh, I love
Exactly.
it. I love it.
Fantastic. Well, thank you guys so much for your support. So how, if there's anybody watching this that's seeing you guys for the first time, how can they find you guys?
You can get us on rumble.com/MG show, at In the Matrix with 3 X's, at Shady Groove with 3 O's. That's on X. Okay. We post our show just like Scott does, just like you're watching it on Twitter right now. We do that same thing. And I try to follow people back too. And any podcast platform. In fact, Scott, we just got big news that we're the top 3% of over 3 million podcasts. We're in the top 3%, and we're not even on Spotify.
We are 106,503rd.
Yep.
Well, that's really good.
Of
That's
every
awesome.
podcast
That's awesome.
ever created. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Well, I've got, and the times that I've been on your show, I think each time I got over 200,000 cumulative views. So
Wow. Great.
yeah, there's a lot of you guys are doing really important work. So
Thank you for
appreciate
that.
you.
God
Yeah.
bless.
And Q says, we are the news now. Literally, like we're in the news. QAnon, Jeff Peterson, booga booga. And then we are the news. Like we're trying to handle the news, right? And we need to handle that with care, just as Shady was saying. And it's our duty to report accurately and fair without any bias. I mean, the only thing that we have is the truth. That's all I want. There's a lot of truth and a lot of facts that I don't like talking about or doing, but we report on it, Shady, haven't we? We've done a pretty good job. I think you've done a great job, Shady, and I'm honored to know you. Thank you for being my partner for almost 7 years, bro.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for doing it. And for everybody out there that has supported us over the years, that I know a bunch of you are here now. We're moving into the next phase of this. We're out of this echo chamber of this silly nonsense. We're going to talk about America. We're going to talk about MAGA, and we're going to talk about how it is that we orient ourselves and our family so that we can be abundant in the future. This doom and gloom stuff has got to go.
Are we live? No, sorry.
You guys are awesome.
God bless.
Fun. It's fun. Well, yeah. God bless you guys. God bless each and every one of you that joined us. Thank you so much. And I can't wait for next time because we do have a lot more to cover. And I think we probably have 2 more shows at least out of this. So
sounds great. We'll be here with bells on.
All right. Awesome. Until next time. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
All right.